Next up, we have Malik Willis, the QB out of Liberty, who has kind of all of a sudden, the closer we continue to get to the draft, has emerged as seemingly the consensus QB1. And as you guys will see on the screen, I don't quite have him there. Not that he's a bad player. I just think that he's got a lot of room for growth. And in that regard, he's a very high potential guy, right? That's one thing that jumps off the tape right away. There's some very specific traits that I think are incredibly rare in prospects. And if he's able to work up some of his other areas of his game, we could be looking at a great quarterback here. Very possible. But for me, in my grading scale, which we've talked about a ton in previous videos and last year's videos, I don't really grade for potential that much, right? So if you're somebody who cares a ton about, that guy's a raw prospect, but don't worry, they'll learn all those techniques later, like, I just don't really look at it like that. I think there will be some adjustments made, obviously, and guys will improve to a degree, but I don't necessarily think it's a big enough degree to where, say, I would change this grade to a first-round grade just, at the drop of a hat, right? I just don't quite believe in that, because if there's a chance that they do something and a chance they improve, there's also a chance that they don't. And in that regard, I think Malik Willis, very high ceiling, not necessarily the highest floor of some of these QB prospects, but in terms of why and what makes him good, what do I think needs to be improved, the first thing that jumps off the tape, obviously, I have it in all caps, great athlete. An absolutely absurd athlete. And, part of that is potentially because, he plays for a Liberty, so he's not necessarily on the field with the Alabamas on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe that is partially why I thought he was such a great athlete, but just watching him scramble around was just very fluid, very comfortable running, was agile, was powerful at times, like just a really good athlete. We'll just leave it at that. I think another area where he's very good, exceptionally good, is the arm strength. I gave him an 18.75 out of 20, which is right up there with the best of the best, right? Don't have a ton of guys to compare him to yet in this class in terms of videos I've done. The last video I did Kenny Pickett. I gave Pickett a 12.5, right? So you could just see kind of the stark difference there between the two. I just thought that he could make legitimately any throw on the field in terms of like a physical ability to make it. And I thought that there was, great zip on any throw that he wanted there to be, right? Did he sometimes stick with the fastball? Sometimes when he maybe needed a changeup at times? Yes. But just in terms of that arm strength that you can't really teach, it was there and in bunches. Where I thought things were more questionable was the accuracy. And that was, for me, I don't want to say his worst negative, but it was probably the biggest area that I'm concerned about because, accuracy, it sounds like it's something that should be easy to teach, but it's very rare that you see guys just all of a sudden become accurate, right? I mean, Josh Allen, by example, his completion percentage went up a ton. That's an exception, I think, rather than a rule, and part of that was because they bolstered the supporting cast, obviously, but not to get on Josh Allen, we'll stick on Malik Willis here. I just thought even the intermediate and short accuracy was questionable, highly questionable. One of the notes I wrote was it feels easier for him to throw the ball 41 yards than 14, and it really did look like that. It looked like he was exerting himself more to throw a curl route than he was a deep post, and obviously that's probably not the case in terms of actual physical exertion, but it was just very interesting watching him deliver the football anywhere that he sent it, because like I said, flick of the wrist on deep balls, but some of those short patterns, it just did not look very natural, and it didn't look very good. And one of the sayings that I feel like I've heard in every sport that I've played, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, bowling, in some regard, you'll hear a coach say, you need to aim small to miss small, right? Regardless of what you're talking about, whether it's a board you're trying to hit while you're bowling, or the strike zone you're trying to paint, or a punch you're trying to throw in terms of, me being an offensive tackle, right? When you're trying to strike a guy, you want your target to be very small, so that way when you miss, and if you miss, you're only missing narrowly, right? It felt like Malik was the type of guy who aimed big. And like, we're talking about just aiming for general zones. And there were times where receivers were lucky to get a hand on it. And that's not necessarily good because, like, in the Kenny Pickett video, by example, that's kind of the second layer to accuracy that I was talking about there, where Pickett, the ball was almost always in the correct vicinity. Receiver can almost always get a hand on it. But Pickett even took it to the next level, particularly in the short and intermediate throws, in terms of being able to place the ball in a particular spot, say away from the defensive back, right? The wide receiver has leverage in a particular direction. Pickett's going to throw it just out of the defender's reach, right? And it looked very clean on a lot of attempts, right? He was doing a good job setting guys up to, maybe juke out of a particular predicament, spin out of a particular predicament, right? Like, it felt like Pickett had a very, very good control of, not only the ball he was throwing, but a very good sense of what the defensive backs were doing, right? A very good sense of anticipation in that regard. I didn't think Willis had that. In fact, in terms of anticipation, I gave him a 5.25, but I thought that we saw that in terms of the accuracy as well, because for him, the ball placement itself was not even a conversation on a lot of these short and intermediate throws. It was just like, are they catchable balls? And yeah, I gave him a 12.75 there. Definitely not his best category. And something that, like I said, I don't know how much that'll necessarily improve as things proceed. In terms of some other areas that I thought were worth discussing, decision making. I wasn't necessarily the biggest fan at times. It was interesting because I put on 6 games of Malik, and the early games from the season, Syracuse, it was definitely Syracuse. Syracuse, if your team drafts Malik Willis and you want to feel good about the pick, go put on the Syracuse tape. That was an incredible game. As well as, I believe it was ODU early in the season. Those were incredible games, and you would expect and hope that a guy is going to get better and it only improve as the season goes on. But then between games 6, 9, and 10 that I put on towards the end of the year, I believe he threw 7 INTs in 3 games. And, they weren't like, tipped ball, unlucky break, dropped a dropped reception by a receiver that bounces off a foot that, doinks some guy in the mouth guard and then falls into the defender's lap. No. It was a lot of boneheaded decisions. So in that regard, I give him a 6.25 out of 10 on decision making, because some of the throws, like, he can make every throw, but just because you can doesn't always mean that you should. And I thought that that's something that he's going to have to work on. And speaking to those couple of early season games, we'll just talk about that right now. In that Syracuse game, I mean, there's throws that if you just showed somebody that game and said, where do you think this guy should go? I think the answer would almost unanimously be top 5, and some people would probably think he's like a gold jacket guy, right? Like, just incredible in terms of his ability to drop the ball in a bucket deep, right? We're talking 25, 30, 45, 50 yards just down the sidelines, over double coverage. Incredible stuff. And then you see it in other games, and it's like, opposed to just narrowly fitting the ball between the corner with the flat zone and the safety over top in cover 2, it seems like in other games he's just completely ignoring the safety and essentially giving him a free interception, right? Like, it's like sometimes he doesn't see him, other times it's a absolutely perfectly beautiful ball. And I think that really, to me, is what summed up Malik Willis. There's flashes of absolute greatness, and then there's flashes of just, I don't want to say deer in the headlights, but there really are flashes of, like, why do I even have a second round grade on this guy? And I guess those kind of even out over the over the long haul of all the snaps that I watched. But if he goes to a team with a good supporting cast, and we start to see more of the good and less of that bad, I mean, we could really be talking about a potential top 5, top 10 quarterback pretty easily. It's kind of funny because a lot of the stuff actually in my evaluation itself, in terms of just the verbiage I'm using, it's actually pretty similar to some of the stuff that I did put about Texas Tech Pat Mahomes. I was not a big Mahomes guy. I called him, in my report, one of the biggest boomer bust prospects that I've ever watched. And I think that it just so happened he boomed. He got put in a great scenario and a team that really played to his strengths. I think Malik, I'm not saying that he necessarily, he could be Pat Mahomes. Obviously, I feel like that's something that's thrown around way too much, but I do think some of those similar tools are there. But can he be as accurate and as comfortable throwing these short and intermediate balls as he is throwing the deep balls? Can you get an OC and a QB coach that work with him enough to where, like I said, that 14 becomes more natural than the 41? Because at the next level, the 41 is not quite going to be there like it was in college. You're not playing UAB, ODU, MTSU. You're not playing those guys in the NFL. You're playing the absolute best of the best. And I'm worried that some of the looks that were already tight are just going to be smothered, and then he might struggle a little bit because there wasn't a lot of throwing guys open necessarily, as I kind of talked about with the anticipation and decision making and whatnot. It was, a lot of wait till you see a guy open, throw it to him, hope it's in the vicinity. And I just don't know if that's necessarily going to work. If it does, I think it could work out very, very well. If it doesn't, I think it could work very poorly. And we're talking about a guy that, I hate to say it, but I'm not a big fan of the bust term, but for expectations, I think he could be a guy that fails upon those expectations pretty quickly. We'll just say that. I'm not going to say he's going to bust out of the league or anything like that, but there is a possibility of him just not living up to any expectations at all and being a, say, career backup, right? That's a real thing. But there's also a chance he's a top 10 quarterback. It's wild, and I think it's going to highly depend on where he goes. And in that regard, if I was a team picking at the end of the first round that had a good team, that was maybe looking for a QB and maybe had a QB that was going to retire, and in a year, 2 years, you could sit him down for a couple of years, I think I might like Malik Willis a lot more than I would say if I'm, just for example, the Lions at 2. I know a lot of people have said that would not be, I don't think, a very good fit. We'll just say that. And with that being said, that's pretty much all I have on Malik Willis here. A fascinating prospect, a guy that I would feel comfortable taking in the second round. It's important to note that when I say second round, it's not a slight on the guy. It's just, if I was making the pick, that's where I would feel comfortable taking him. He'll probably go sooner. Will most definitely go sooner, according to all the hype and whatnot, rumors that we've heard as of late. But it'll be very interesting to analyze this afterwards in terms of where he goes, because I think that'll obviously strongly influence his ultimate success or failure percentages and whatnot at the next level. So with that being said, if you thought this video was a success or a failure, let me know in the comment section down below. Leave me a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever you guys got to do. Just do it. And hopefully if you did enjoy, you'll subscribe, so that way you are in the loop with all my future uploads, scatter reports, etc., as we continue on through the summer here. So with that being said, that's all I have for you guys today. I'm Mike Up, now Mike out. Peace, guys. I'll see you next time.